Okay, welcome to the Patriotic Pears finishing tutorial. We are going to gather our supplies first. So I'm going to kind of show you all the things I've gathered that are going to make putting our pears together. And then we're going to kind of break it down. I like to do what I call mass produce. So we're going to kind of prep everything. Well, we're going to gather supplies, we're going to prep everything, and then we're going to start assembling. So you first want to have your 3 stitched pieces, or however many you stitched, to get, you want to gather those up, and you want to make sure they're nice and pressed so that the stitched area looks really nice. So I've got my stitching here. You also want to grab your Patriotic Pears pattern. And we're going to be utilizing this piece here for the bottoms of our pears, the leaves, and the stems. If you stitched on 36, you can use this right here. I did stitch mine on 36 count. But if you stitched on a different count, you're going to want to grab the download. I have it in the sidebar of my blog, and I have resized the pears for different counts. So we've got a 40, a 28. I did go ahead and put the 36 on here. It is the same size as this one, and the 32. Now, what I want to tell you about the PDF here is, or the template, please make sure you check your stitching underneath the template before you start cutting, okay? Let's just look at it through here. I know mine is way too small for the 28 count, but what I want to mention about this, you want to make sure that you have a nice border all the way around. You're going to have to do a little imagining because I don't have that size of fabric here, but you want to make sure that you have at least 1/4 of an inch all the way around your stitching. If you don't, you might need to adjust your pear a little bit. Your fabric may just be off a little bit, or my template might be off just a little bit. I did my best to size it for those sizes, but please check first. You should always check. Even with a pattern template, please check first. So I'm going to show you mine since mine's going to be the 36. And these have the seam allowance built in. So that means this is the outer line. This little dotted line is 1/4 inch inside. I just did not put that on the template. So they are the right size to cut out. So let me show you on the 36 count. When I position my pear here, I am going to make sure that there is 1/4 inch from the furthest point here of my stitching. Well, the 1/4 inch is here. So I want to make sure that I have it centered within this area, that nothing is clear up. Like, I wouldn't want it to be like this, where I'm stitching here and then I have this big gap over here. So just double check with all of yours, and you might need to print this out and cut it out and lay it on your stitching to see exactly, or if you have a light box, that would work too. So wanted to make that note about our templates. I'm going to go ahead and keep my 36 out, and I'm going to use that. But you want to grab this as well. Then if you bought the finishing kit from Lindy Stitches, go ahead and grab that, or grab your fabrics. You want to grab some lightweight fusible interfacing. I'm going to use mine from the kit. I also have a whole bolt of it because I do use it a lot. But I will have a couple of options of down in the description below. I use SF911 fusible featherweight. That's my preference. I don't like a really bulky interfacing. So if you're looking for one, because you don't have the kit, you can grab that. But I'll use the interfacing that came in the kit for mine. And then, of course, you're going to need a piece of wool, felted wool. Or if you want to use regular felt, I had a question regarding that. You absolutely can. In fact, my spring green pears, I used wool felt, not the felted wool. Now you'll notice that the piece of felt that we got in our kit from Lindy Stitches is sized to fit this. So we're going to start by grabbing all of our templates here in just a minute, and I'll show you how we will cut out all of our pieces. I also recommend a good pair of scissors. If you have your leftover white floss from stitching, we are going to use that for the decorative stitches along the edges, or I'm going to. You can use whatever you like. I have a Sharpie for tracing. I also have my air erasable marker. This is my preference. You can get water erasable ones, but I like the air erasable. It will eventually disappear. I also have a wool pressing mat because that's going to be handy for showing you some of the steps along the way. You can also just use an ironing board, but I like this wool pressing mat. I use it a lot. And then I have a little mini iron. I have a little mini Oliso here, but any iron is going to work. Again, this works great for on camera. The other thing, not necessary, but does make this easier, is some freezer paper. And we are going to use this for the templates. I'm going to be showing you how I use this for the templates today. And I do want to remind you that everything I'm showing is mostly optional. You can follow the finishing directions they're on the pattern piece. You can follow the finishing directions directly from Annie that come in your chart. I am mostly following that, but I'm going to show you exactly how I put my pears together. For stuffing our pears, I'm going to be using some wool roving today. You could also use polyester fiber fill. And then to give the pear some weight, I'm going to be using some ground walnut shells. You could also use your favorite weighted material, poly pellets, glass beads, other things with weight in them. I like these unscented ground walnut shells. I also have a huge container. This is what's left in the small bags that I used to get, but I went ahead and invested in a big container of them because I do tend to need them a lot. And I like them for the base of the pear as it gives some nice weight. To put the ground shells in, I do recommend if you have a funnel, it makes it so much easier. And then I like a little bowl and you'll see I kind of use it to contain my pear and to hold it up. Gives you an extra set of hands. And that's what we're going to be using for filling. If you have some sort of a bamboo stick or a poker tool, just to kind of help shove your stuffing material in, that is helpful as well. Okay, so we're going to start with our template here. So grab your template, grab your marking pen, and a piece of freezer paper would be great. So I'm just going to pull a little piece off like so. So the shiny side is actually the side that we're going to iron to our wool. I'm not going to iron it to anything else, but I am going to iron this to my wool. Don't worry, it won't ruin it at all. So I'm simply going to place this right over my piece here, and I am going to trace my pattern pieces. You could use a ruler if you want straighter lines. Okay, once you have your pieces traced here, I am going to actually cut away. Since I have such a big piece here, we're just going to cut away this excess. All right, it's time to do a little ironing. We're going to do our ironing all at once here. Again, this is not going to be permanent on your wool. So I want to make sure that it's completely on the wool here. I'm just using a dry iron. And we're going to iron the freezer paper in place. This is going to help with precision cutting. If you want, you can also trace these out on a lightweight paper, trace around them if you have like a white marking pen, especially for the dark wool, and cut them out. This is just a very easy way to do that. So now all I'm going to do is cut out all of my shapes. Even if you finished your pear on 28, you are going to be able to use these. So any of the sizes, I will say maybe on 40, you might want to trim down your base a little bit, but on the larger size pears, a 28 or a 32, you're just going to want to make sure your opening down at the bottom when we get to sewing our pear pieces together will be covered by this. If you want to cut yours bigger, you can, but I don't think it's necessary. Okay, magic time. All we're going to do is peel this off of our wool now. Super, super easy. And we're going to have all of our pieces all prepped. Sometimes you can reuse these templates after you've ironed them a couple times, and the wool does leave a little bit of residue, so I don't know how great they'd work again, but if you're using them for cotton fabrics, a lot of times you can get several uses out of them. Okay, if you got the finishing kit from Lindy's Stitches, here's the piece of interfacing we have. So just kind of looking at it, engaging. I don't think you will be able to get all, like, the full piece of fabric. Does that make sense? And your pears on here. So I just wanted to show you kind of laid out like that. So you're going to need to kind of be careful with how you use this. And this might be one of those cases. I'll grab my 36 template here. I'm going to slide it underneath this top layer. What I would recommend if you got the kit to make the most of our fusible interfacing is we're probably going to do, I'm going to use my air erasable pen here, but I would recommend tracing the pieces. Out of each fabric, you're going to need 2 pairs. Now, I want to show you something before we start cutting, and this is really important. 2 of these are somewhat directional. This one is not, you can see some of the stuff is upside down, so you can choose to use this, but our map is pretty directional. So I want to show on our big 28 count. In fact, let's cut that one out. This is going to be the same for any of them, but I really want to note this for the 28 count pattern. All right, fusible interfacing is completely optional, by the way. This is my preference for how I like to put my pairs together. I like the structure. I also use it in pillow finishes and other finishes. But what I wanted to make mention of here is you might need to be kind of creative with your pair. Remember, this has our seam allowance in it. If you're doing a smaller count fabric, you're going to have more room. This is an air erasable pen. So I'm going to go ahead and draw on my fabric to show you exactly how to do your 28 count or 14 count Aida as it were. So this is for 14 or 28. So I've traced around one of them, and you can see I made sure directionally I'm going the right way. See that little outline on there? All right, to fit our other pair in, We are going to have to, I should have scooted that over maybe a little, but see, that's why I like to trace it on here first. You're going to have to scoot it pretty far over. In fact, this is getting in my way. Let me show you. So I should have scooted that clear up next to the edge. So we're just going to scoot it over just a little bit and retrace. That's also why I like to use an air erasable or water erasable or heat erasable pen. Okay, so I scooted that over, which gives me just enough room for our 28. Now, yes, if we were positioning them this way, you don't have to worry about this as much, but I did want to make mention directionally, it does make a difference. You will be fine. I know we get a little selvage over here where this one was cut. Depending on the cut you get, it might be a little bit different, but this is all in the seam allowance and you're going to be just fine. So you can fit your 28 count on here. I would do the same thing for the red print. If you got the red print, make sure that you're kind of up here closest to the top as possible. Looks like my piece is a little bit small, actually. Although some of these pieces could go up and down, honestly, but what I would do, you may have to be creative with your placement. And mostly this is going to affect our 28 count stitchers. And you might be able, okay, I also want to mention this. This is an estimate. This might be slightly big. So if that is the case, you might be able to cut this down just a little bit too if you wanted to. Or I might just do both of them this way and not care. Honestly, our stitching is the focal point. Okay, now I wanted to show on this piece, because direction doesn't matter, I would do them like this, okay? If you were a 28 or 14, my suggestion is, whoops, not this, is to take your stitching, and if you can do it a little bit smaller than my template and still not be into your stitching, you want to have a 1/4 inch around, then I would go in, I would measure in a 1/4 of an inch maybe and trim that down just a little bit more. It's going to give you a little bit more room. Maybe to have your stitching a little tighter to, I don't have one right here on hand, so it's going to just depend on your stitching, if that makes sense. Now 32 count. So 32 count is going to be our next biggest pair. And there is a vast difference between the 32 and the 28. The 28 might be slightly too big. My template might be. So you can see we're going to have more than enough room with our 32. For 28, you may have to get creative, friends. So just keep that in mind. This is how I would do the 32. And of course, 36 and 40, the same. And on this one, you can do it this way or you can do it this way. Hope that makes sense. Please ask questions if you have them. And again, our focal point is this piece, is our stitching. So I don't worry too much. This one's super grungy. There is text going every which direction. It's mostly your blue piece. So what I would suggest is taking your template, if you're a 28 count stitcher, and maybe try to mark it down. And the best way to do that, and this goes for anything, if you don't love the template size, start by marking it down a little bit. So what I do, I'll do it with my black pen so you can see. So I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to grab at the 1/4 inch mark, and you're just going to want to make little marks at a 1/4 inch all the way. And then what I do is I connect those. I would start by trying to bring it down a little bit that way and see if your stitching still fits within here. So basically you would be changing the size of your pear template down by 1/4 inch and see if that fits better. If not, get creative with how you put your fabric on or your template on here. You could even go a little bit more at an angle, which I think would work well too. Okay? So just a few little tips on making it work. Even tilting it just the tiniest bit is going to give you a little bit more room to play with the cut of fabric you have. All right. And that really only pertains to our 28 and 28 or 14 count stitchers. All right. Back to our fusible interfacing. So what you're going to want to do is trace your template. And I already lost mine. You're going to want to trace your template onto your fusible interfacing. You need 3 of these per pair. And I'm going to buddy mine up upside down and trace and get all of those on here. And then we're going to take them to our fabric. Okay, I actually think I traced one too many pairs, but that's okay. So I've got all my pairs on here, and actually the way I did it, you get lots of extra. So if you have something else, some little pillows that you need interfacing, you've got extra here. Yippee. So, or maybe you're making more pairs. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually not going to cut right on the pair line and cut it out. You can if you want to, but we're going to cut them apart until we have 12, 9, math is hard, 9 individual pair images. Not pair images, until we have 9 individual pairs here on our interfacing. Okay, so we have a nice little chunk left depending on the size of your pairs. If you did bigger pairs, you might not, okay? If you did 28, you might, again, have to be a little more creative with your placement. Just keep that in mind. Or you don't have to use interfacing on your fabric like I'm going to. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to fuse our interfacing on all of our pairs. And I am going to first thing. Okay, so I kind of like to take this actually over to a window. I know here, maybe if I hold it like, see how you can see that through there? A light box or a window, and I kind of am going to trace out right where I want this to go, so I make sure and get my interfacing in the right place. So let me take this over to my window and trace around that first. Okay, over at my window, I did a rough template from mine, and I did it on the back because what I want to do is match it up. And this, especially on the dark fabric, on the lighter fabric, it's a lot easier. You might want to cut this out before you fuse it. I generally like to cut mine out later, but just for the sake of making sure my placement is correct, I'll show you how I do it on the fabric here in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and just cut my pair interfacing. This protects your stitching, and again, I just like how it gives a little structure to this. Okay, so once I have it lined up, we're just going to fuse this in place. Now, you want to make sure, again, there's a 1/4 inch margin all the way around, and I put mine up a little bit because when it's stuffed here and flat on the bottom, I want to still be able to see this great design. And here we go. So there is our little pair. All on there, and I can cut this out now. And I'm going to do this for all 3. And I like just working here on the back. I know that I have avoided my stitches. I looked through the window, got all of that. Here is our little pear shape ready to sew, okay? So the fabric for our pear, so we're kind of matching our pears blue, red, and then the creamy floral white, but you can do whatever you want. So what I'm going to do now is on the back of this piece of fabric, I am going to take 2 of my pears, and I might be able to get mine, because I'm using a little bit, again, smaller, I probably can get mine side by side up here. Just however they fit the best on your fabric. Okay? And again, be very aware that we've got everything going the right direction for directional fabric, or at a little bit of an angle wouldn't be bad either. And we're going to iron this in place. Just fusing our interfacing to the back of the pieces. And if you are stitching, pardon me, if you finish your pears a little bit on a higher count, so they're smaller, you may have a little extra fabric you can use for something else. Okay, so when you're doing the lighter fabric, my actual preference is to just iron it on and then cut it out. But just with the darker, that's a little bit harder to do. So we're going to actually do it this way on this one. So I'll show you. I like having that iron-on stabilizer on and then trimming it up. All right, friends, we should now have 3 red pieces, our stitching, and 2 cotton pieces, our white stitching, and our 2 beigey floral pieces, or whatever you're using, and our blue with the 2 pieces of fabric for that one. We are going to take all of these over to the sewing machine. And before we do that, I do want to note something. So I want you to look in your chart, and if you see these 2 little marks here, if it helps you, and really no matter what size you're using, you may want to, for example, and they may not match up exact, and that is okay. That happens every time with me. So for example, for mine, I'm going to do this as my reminder. And then this little mark up here. So we're going to make, I like to draw little marks. So I have marked here, here, and here. When we stitch first, we're going to stitch. So we're going to stitch, and we could really start. Let's start with these 2 pieces here, like this. You want to start stitching here, and we're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to stop right here. Even if you're stitching the 28 or the 32, make these same notes along the bottom. not make those marks, pardon me, along the bottom, because when we go to sew our wool felt, it should give you an opening roughly the same. You don't want to have your opening a lot bigger. This opening should still be big enough, even on different counts of fabric and different pear finishes, for you to stuff it. Okay? So let's go over to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch here down to here. And then you'll simply take the next pair and stitch here to here. And then we're going to finish here to here. So what I'm going to do on all of my pieces is I'm going to mark that top, and I am going to mark this. So just kind of in that center, right? And then we're going to make all those little marks, and then we're going to go sew these together. So let me take these over to the sewing machine and show you. So I like to pin mine. And actually we're going to do it this direction. That's fine. So I've got a 1/4 inch foot on here, or you might want to mark on your sewing machine. And I'm going to back stitch a couple stitches there. And then I just want to do a nice curve. So I'm going to take my time. I don't want any sharp pointy bits. And if my pears aren't exactly even, it's okay if the seam allowance is a little bit less. More concerned about getting that nice curved edge. And when I get to that other notch, I'm going to back stitch. Okay. So here is one side of our pear. Next, we're going to take our stitching, and I'm just kind of folding back what I just stitched. See, so now that's a top of the pear, and we're going to line up that notch with that. So I'm just going to kind of go right there. Like so. Just going to pin. And then I'm going to pin this side of the pear only to start with. This is our stitched panel we're stitching now. Just like this. Okay. Now I'm actually going to flip it over and stitch from this direction. So I'm just going to come in right here, and I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to back stitch a couple, and then we're going to do the same thing and stitch gently all around that curve. And I just take my time. Okay, I'm going to pull my pins out again, and then we're going to double check it. Look how cute that's looking. Okay, so next we need to do these sides right here, right? And I am a pinner. If you do not like to pin, by all means, do it your way. I'm a no rules kind of crafter. You do what you want here. But I'm going to pin because I feel like I get much better and it's not super wonky. That's my goal always. All right, we're going to start up here again. Right here at our little mark That's why we want to mark all the pieces. And I'm just gently trying to go around those curves. Again, I don't like any jaggedy, funny little stitches, so I just take my time with this. There we go. Okay, now what I like to do, we're going to flip her on out and double check before we do that. Okay? So I'm just going to, and it's okay that the top might have a little opening because we're going to put our stem there. So I actually don't mind that. It's not super big. So I'm just going to kind of go in with my fingers. And sometimes I do like to clip the curves, but this is one of those finishes you don't necessarily have to if you don't want to. I'm going to. But let's just, I like to pop it out. And I want to double check everything, especially my stitching. How does that look? Do I think that it looks nice and even? This actually looks phenomenal. And you're going to want to rub your fingernail kind of along those curved edges, popping at all the little nooks and crannies out, like right down here. See how that's needs to be pulled out a little more. I'm just going to run my fingernail along the back. And we have a pear. So let's go sew up the other two. Okay, so we're going to turn our final pear out here. But I think this, just kind of getting your fabric all prepped and sewn, then getting your pear all put together, we're making progress. So again, gonna really use my finger. I was gonna clip the curves and I just decided not to. I don't really think I even need to. They're pretty gentle for this shape, so I'm just pushing my finger, making sure pop all of that out, just like so, running my finger along the seam. Time to stuff our pears. So I have this bowl here I was talking about. I've got my pear, and the reason I like the bowl, some sort of a bowl, is see how it holds it up a little bit. So what we're going to do, whether you're using wool, polyester fiber fill, cotton batting, whatever it is you like to use, I cut mine into smaller pieces, and you're going to do the same thing no matter what. We're going to loft it a lot. Polyester fiber fill too. Make sure you're lofting so we don't get any weird clumps. But I like to put this up in the top of the pear. So basically it's going to be our wool roving or polyester fiber fill, ground walnut shells, and then a little more polyester fiber fill just to kind of tuck it all in place. So loft, loft, and loft some more. You probably will want to dust and lint roll when you're done doing any sort of stuffing, because I do think it gets everywhere. And I use my little piercing tool. We want to give our pear a really good shape. So I'm going to use this to really shove that down there in the top of my pear. And I do find that all stuffed items tend to take way more stuffing than you think they're going to take. So I'm going to continue stuffing this one. I'm going to do this one completely here on camera, and then I will speed up the remaining two because it will just be the same steps for all three. And I'm going to go probably about at least halfway with my wool roving before I ever put walnut shells in here. And I'm just pushing that down really good. Probably getting close to half. Let's do another tuft of this. Kind of all over in the body of our pear. And then I'm going to take a little bit, and these other two corners out here, well, actually all three of these little corners. So we're going to do a little group of our wool roving kind of in all of these. So I'm going to shove that over there. We'll loft another little bit. We're going to shove this one over here. And we'll grab another little bit here. And I'm going to shove this one kind of over into there. Almost leaving like a little well in here. It's starting to take shape. Look at that. Okay, so I'm going to shove my funnel in. And I'm going to open my bag of walnut shells. And I'm probably going to do about 1/3 of a cup. I don't know. I didn't measure it. But I'm just kind of using the tip of my funnel to shove it in. I'm lifting it up, letting them pour out, and then I'm just shoving those in here. Just like that. And that is really filling that nicely. Okay, so now that it's pretty full, we're going to go ahead. We're going to loft a bunch more. I know it looks full, but we're going to go ahead and start kind of covering up that nice and gentle. But this is going to just kind of give us a nice little closed edge, or so that they don't fall out quite as easy before we put our little patch here on the bottom. See how that's looking? And we totally need a little bit more over here. We want it to be really nice and full. I want to show you really quick. So kind of naturally, just going to fold under these edges of my pear, the raw edges, if you will, like so. See how we have our little triangle? And our wool piece is going to fit right over this, and we're going to hand stitch that in place, and that's going to be the bottom of our pear. So I'm going to shove a little here into these corners. Again, I just like mine to be really nice and full. Give it good shape, especially when we tip it over. I don't want everything shifting in the overhead bin. You know what I'm saying? So we want that to be just like this. Okay, so I'm actually going to take my little pokey tool and I'm going to try to work my way up here. And I really want to make sure, we'll roll this in a little bit, like how this looks. Look how good that is. Okay, I think it needs maybe a little teeny tiny more stuffing. The rule is when you think it's full, put a little bit more in. Or that's my rule. Okay? And I'm just kind of trying to keep that raw edge, about that 1/4 inch, folded in just to keep it nice. It doesn't matter all that much. We're going to cover it up. Okay, so let me put just a little more in this corner here, I think. Like that. And this other front corner as well. Just going to kind of push all of our stuffing material in. All right, so we're going to take our piece of wool then, and what I like to do, I'm just going to pin mine in place until because I'm going to stuff all of these and then sew them all at once. And it is pretty full. So I'm going to need to catch that edge a little bit. I'm just going to stick a pin. Going to kind of do this straight edge here along the bottom first. Kind of make sure that's nice and even with our stitching. And then I'm just going to kind of push my sides in just a tiny bit. And I do like pinning it first. It's going to give you a good idea that it's straight before you start stitching it and it goes wonky. I just think it's a smart idea. Because if you need to make any adjustments, like over here, I did not catch that good, you can do that. Easier now, although you can rip it out, and I have ripped them out before and started over. Okay, so there's the bottom of our pear. I want to show you. It's not stitched on yet, but look at how good that's going to sit up. How adorable is this? Okay, I'm going to set this one aside, and we need lint rolled real bad. And we're going to do the other two really quickly. Okay, so I am loading up my needle with 2 strands of floss. You can use anything you want here, but I am using the blue floss I used to stitch my pear. And I like the 2 strands. I think it gives a little more strength And also, see my little stitches along the edge here? So that's what that's gonna look like, okay? All right. I like to start underneath the edge in my cotton fabric. That's where I'm gonna bury my original knot. So I'm just gonna kind of come up underneath here, grab a little bit of my fabric, and I'm just gonna pull, and my knot has slipped up underneath. Then I'm going to pull straight up, and we're just going to whip stitch this. So I've put my needle in straight from where I came up, through the wool, down back through the cotton fabric, but now at an angle, and I'm going to push out. And I'm going to snug that up, come straight up from where I just was, go in at a little angle right along the edge of where the wool felt is into the cotton fabric. And there I've got 2 stitches. Again, straight, and then at a little angle, and I try to stitch evenly. It doesn't always happen. It's okay. This is the bottom. No one's going to see. The pear's sitting on it, sitting on its little hiney here, so it's all right if we don't get it exact. But we want to bring the needle right up next to the felted wool. Okay, straight down again. Now we're going into the cross stitch fabric. Same thing. Nothing different about this. Except I forgot to put more pins in here, didn't I? Which really does help hold our fabric in place. And as you're working, you're probably going to want to pull your pins. So straight down, little angle right next to it here. Just gonna pull that pin. Snug it up. Straight down and at an angle again. Again, straight down. Just gonna push that through, and we're just securing the bottom of our pear. So none of that goodness that we've stuffed it with comes falling out. And it gives it this nice, beautiful finished bottom. You're going to want to use a sharp embroidery crewel needle here so that you can easily pierce through your cotton fabric, through the felted wool. You don't want to use your cross stitch needle. I mean, you could, I guess, technically, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to use the rounded tip needle. You're going to have a lot better luck with a sharp tip needle here. And we're going to continue stitching. See those little stitches? And if you have any little, we can trim those up here in a little bit. Any little stringies here. But we're just going to stitch all the way around. Okay, as we come to the end, I'm going to push my needle underneath this last time and snug that up, like just like so. And when we come out here, kind of right back where we started, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to run it right along the edge of the wool felt in the cotton fabric. And I'm going to leave a little loop. We're going to take our end of our needle through once. We're going to go through twice, and I'm going to pull nice and tight, and that's going to pull that knot rather underneath. And then right here, I'm going to take my needle down through here and push it up through the bottom of my pear to bury that knot inside. And then we're just going to snip that off. And if you have any little threads that didn't just pull right off, careful you don't snip what you stitched, but I'm going to clean that up. And then I'm going to take my lint roller and we're going to clean up our pear, get all the fuzzies off. Just like so. All right, we have our 3 pears. Now I'm going to take the white floss, and this is where if you have a white pearl cotton, you can do this as well. We're going to do a herringbone stitch. Now there's a couple of different options for your stitches here. There's like a feather stitch or the herringbone. The herringbone is my personal favorite, so that's the one I am going to demonstrate here today, but there's lots of tutorials on YouTube as well, so find your favorite one and follow along. But that adds a really cute decorative stitch along the edges, and then of course we will finish with our stems and leaves. I like to do this step right now before we have those on. All right, so we're going to do that herringbone stitch. I want to show you it first on the blue pear down both sides. And I'm going to show you how I do this. The first thing I want to mention is I do try my best. It's not perfect. It's handmade, so it's okay. But I try to make this little distance here about 1/4 of an inch. I'm eyeballing it. I'm not actually measuring it. And I start down here at the bottom so that I can hide my knot underneath. So let's do this on the red because I think that's going to show up the best. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually here on the back, and I'm going to kind of work my needle underneath here. And I'm going to come out in the linen, I would say about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. And that's going to be my starting point. And see, I've pulled, and I'm just going to make sure that my knot, I'm just going to kind of shove it with my needle, give it a little tug so that it buries underneath here. I'm going to finish up here at the top, which I can kind of hide it here, and our stem's going to go on top. So I like to hold my pear like this. And I've got my thread, my starter point, and what we're going to do is we're going to kind of bring it up, and we're going to make these elongated X's. So the first stitch is always the hardest. So this is going to be the long leg, and we're going to go backwards with our needle. So here's where I'm going to make my first little 1/4 inch bite. So see how I've come back? And here is the long leg of our X. And then we're going to pull our floss over and see how it's making that little area. And we're going to do the same thing. Now this is where I feel like when you pull and you make the X, you kind of eyeball where you think that large X leg is going to end. For me, I think right about there. That means we're going to take a little bite, and where I want that to end is where my needle is going to come out. And we're going to, oops, our needle should have gone under. There's our big elongated X. Then you pull this over. This isn't really, this might not be the nicest one, but that's real life. So we're going to pull it again. Like that. And you just kind of got to trust the process a little bit. And take your time. There we go. So I'm going to go down this side. I will stitch the other side of this one for you, and then I obviously have stitched one of them and I'll stitch the other one off camera. But this is my favorite decorative edge, I would say. I love this one. Just kind of pull, and it almost will lay right there. I just kind of use that as a little guide. And try to do my stitches as nice as possible. Now, if you have the pearl cotton, you do not have to use embroidery floss, and it does work really nice. But I'm using just that Weeks Dye Works grits that we use to stitch our pear. And if you have a long enough length, you can start and go all the way up and down the other side and bury it, but mine's not going to be long enough, so I'm going to end mine up here. I always like to have a plan. I don't want to stop mid herringbone stitch at all. So this is going to be our last little bite here and cross over, and now we're up here in the center. And this one, I didn't get it stitched great up here anyway, so I'm just going to grab a little tiny side from each. And we're going to make a little stitch, kind of make a little loop, if you will. And I'm going to go through once, same direction, go through twice, and I'm just going to pull. That causes that knot. I'm going to go down through the seam and out the back to bury that knot, and then we're going to snip. And we have one side decorative stitched. Let's get the other side stitched. Okay, so now we are going to sew up our stem and leaves. So each pear is going to get 2 leaves and a little stem. So this little rectangle here, what you're going to do is we're going to roll it kind of tight into a little tube, basically, or a stem. Just like that. Okay. And then I've got 2 strands of my knotted thread, and I'm going to just kind of bury, again, that knot down the center, and I'm going to come up along that edge. And we're going to whip stitch our little tube here. Just like so. You can pin it if you need to. You could also pick a color of floss that maybe matches a little better if you want, although I don't really mind the little stitches here. See if I can move my fingers out of the way. There we go. And as we get down here to the bottom, I'm just going to, whoops, I'm going to take this and I'm going to kind of take it through the middle again with this last little stitch. But I'm just going to grab that loop, go through it twice, and we're going to pull that tight. And then I am going to stick my needle like through the middle and just push it through to bury that knot and that end. And I'll do that again because I know it's tiny. So we've got our little stem and leaves. So let's go ahead and tack this one down. We're going to start with the leaves and then the stem. I'm going to use the rest of this floss. And after I make my knot, I always cut off like that extra after the knot so that we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I have a long enough piece that I can do both. I'm going to kind of start here right in the center, and I'm just going to come out a little bit, again, just so I can bury that little knot in there. And I am going to come up through one of my leaves. And we're just going to tack it in place. Just kind of like so. And I'm going to double check that I like my little placement here. Okay. And I'm going to kind of go down and up, and we're going to come up through our second leaf. And this is just tacking them in place. Okay, and then I'm going to put my little stitch through there and come up. Okay, so right now I have both of my little leaves. Now we're going to take our stem, and I am going to try to put the stitched part in the back, and I'm going to put that right where my leaves meet. And if you want a little help, it's a great idea to take a couple of little pins and maybe I'm just pushing them down in there to hold it so that I can stitch around the base. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my stem. Whoops. We're going to take our needle through our stem, and I'm going to come out in the fabric of my pear right next to that, like so. I'm going to pull tight, and I'm going to tack all around this bottom edge. Maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 stitches, maybe more. So I went through, whoops, sorry, went through my pear stem, then my fabric of my pear. And just kind of repositioning it as I'm going. Okay, let me take my pins out and see how we're doing. Okay, I feel like we need to come up right here. So I'm coming in from this side and I'm just going through my stem, coming out, and then I'm going to go back down underneath and come up here close to the base of my stem. We're just tacking it in place, but trying to not have our stitches be obnoxious, if that makes sense. Oh, actually, I think that looks pretty cute. Okay, I'm going to do one more little tacking stitch right here, I think. And when you're happy with it, right near the base, I'm going to take one of those tiny little bites again, leaving a little loop, and we're going to go through the loop once, we're going to go through the loop twice, and we're going to pull super tight, and then I'm going to take my needle and push it down near the base of the stem and out through the side of your pear. Don't try to stab yourself like I just did. Burying that knot, burying that end inside of our pear. And here is our first little pear. And you can kind of play with your leaves. Oh, look how pretty. Okay, our pears are all finished. You can kind of, you know, scrunch and play with your leaves a little bit, get them how you want. But let me get all three of them. See if I can get all three of them here on camera. How pretty are these? Perfect for our summertime patriotic decor. So pretty. So I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. And happy stitching.